With Kotlin 1.6, the standard library gets more love. A lot of features that you could previously try out experimentally have now stabilized. This includes the long-awaited collection builder APIs, durations, bit operations, typeOf, and more. But you're also getting some new APIs to work with, most notably new multi-platform functions for handling standard input. Let's take a closer look at all of that and more together, right after the intro. And right after you hit that subscribe and like button. You didn't think I'd forget, did you? Up first are the new functions for handling standard input. Up until now, the go-to way to read user input from the standard in stream was via the readLine function. That one reads a line and returns it, or it returns null if the special end-of-file character was read, something that actually doesn't seem to happen quite that much. With Kotlin 1.6, we wanted to address 2 points in regards to this function, the naming and the return type. That's why we're now introducing 2 new functions for handling input, readLn and readLn or null. If you've seen the naming scheme for other Kotlin functions, you may be able to guess what these do. readLn returns a plain, non-nullable string and throws an exception when the end of the input stream is reached. This can happen in certain corner cases, such as when the standard input is redirected to a file, or when the user sends the corresponding control sequence in the terminal, usually by hitting Ctrl-D. readLn or null returns null in that case. In regards to naming, this also means that readLn is now symmetrical to println. We also hope that this will make it easier for newcomers to the language to write their first little programs without having to add a non-null assertion operator in the first few lines of their code, while still giving all null safety aficionados out there the option to explicitly get a nullable return value. For now, readLine is sticking around for a while longer, but we're already recommending you to move to these new functions. The IDE will do the same by giving you the hint to move to these new functions as well. In a future release, we're then planning to gradually deprecate the readLine function. Next up, let's talk a little bit about all the experimental functionality that became stable in Kotlin 1.6. As usual, stable features are completely ready for production use without the use of any opt-in annotations. The first candidate in this section are the collection builders. Collection builders help you create read-only collections that have a complicated initialization logic. By using build list, build set, and build map, you can provide a builder lambda, which is responsible for the creation of your collections. In this sample, we're looking at the build list function, but build set and build map behave the same. Inside the block passed to the function, we're in the creation phase of our collection. Here we can manipulate it as if it was mutable. When the builder returns, the result is a read-only collection. With these builders added to your tool belt, you can now conveniently do everything you can do with a mutable collection as well. You can add elements directly, create intermediate collections, and then merge those elements into your collection, replace elements in your intermediate collection, add them conditionally or in a loop, and so on. And of course, it doesn't matter whether you're building a list, a set, or even a map. It took quite a while, but with Kotlin 1.6, the duration API also becomes stable. It enables you to conveniently work with time durations and measurements, and comes with abstractions for different time units like hours, minutes, and seconds. First up, we listen to your feedback and are reintroducing duration-related extension properties on numbers, like .days, .hours, and .minutes. These create the same kind of duration objects which you can still use to perform arithmetic or access their components. If you have previously used top-level extension functions to create your duration objects while the API was still experimental, check out the What's New in Kotlin 1.6 article on kotlinlang.org to avoid any pitfalls in the migration process. These new extension functions join other functions that are available to construct duration objects, such as the duration parse iso string function. There are also some other minor changes that we're making with the stabilization of the duration API. When using 2 components, which splits a duration into its individual components, as you may have guessed, the first component now has type long. That has a simple reason. It prevents unwanted cutoffs and makes sure that any value in the duration range can be decomposed properly. Kotlin's duration unit enum is also now standalone and no longer a Java util concurrent time unit alias. If you're a fan of lazy execution via Kotlin sequences, I'm sure you'll enjoy our next topic. The split to sequence functions, which you can use with char sequences and regular expressions, are also being promoted to stable. They take an input string and use matches of the given regular expression as the delimiter to split that input string on. But unlike the regular split function, they return the result as a sequence, meaning that all operations on this result are executed lazily. In this example, we're using the split to sequence function to split the input text around fully capitalized words and then find the first word that contains an ampersand, but lazily. As you can see, we're only processing each element until we find our match. No work wasted. If bits and bytes are your buddies, then it's time to pay extra attention. The rotate left and rotate right functions for bit manipulation are also stable in Kotlin 1.6. Using these functions, you can take a number, like an unsigned integer in my case, and rotate its bits left or right by a certain number of bits. To illustrate this, I'm rotating our input number to the right and to the left by 4 bits each. And then we just print the result using a small helper function. If you take a close look, you can see the bit pattern rotate in both directions. And if you keep looking closely, you can also see how this is different from a bit shift. When the pattern exits the number on the left side, for example, it starts reappearing on the right. It's rotating. For those of y'all who are making full use of Kotlin support for reified generics, you'll be excited to hear that the typeOf API is now also stabilized. Inside a reified generic function, you can use typeOf to get a runtime representation of the given type t as an instance of ktype. By using typeOf and passing the returned ktype parameter to another function, this API can also help you avoid inlining large functions that operate on a generic type. In this case, the reified function describe delegates the work on ktype to the second implementation of describe, which takes it as a parameter, in order to distinguish generic types. A bit specialized functionality, but we hope that for those of you who are diving deep into Kotlin's generics, it'll prove useful. Alright, those were the features we wanted to highlight in this release. There's a number of other smaller quality of life features and deprecations in this release as well. For example, a new compare to infix extension has been introduced for comparables. On Kotlin.js, the replace and compare to functions now behave more predictably, and the implementation for regex replace has been overhauled. You may be interested in diving deeper into all of these changes, including some additional samples for the topics we talked about here today. For that, you can go to the What's New in Kotlin 1.6 page, which you can of course find on kotlinlang.org. There, you'll once again find everything you need to know about this latest release. If you want to learn more about how Kotlin 1.6 can improve your life, make sure to also check out the video by Anton Arhipov, which accompanies the release. There you can learn about how the language itself is evolving beyond the standard library. I hope you learned something new and useful today. With all these new stable APIs, I'm sure you'll be able to make your code even more concise and expressive. Do you have any thoughts on these new changes? Then let us know in the YouTube comments below. Apart from that, this is me signing out, and I'm hoping to see you in the next one. Take care.